Hi there folks, welcome to this videos tutorial series to create the game called Collapse that I used to play back in 2002 with my family. I think it's a pretty faithful recreation of that game from what I remember, and I hope you enjoy this series. Let's jump into it. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we've obviously got our import modules here, so we want to go ahead and import, if we can spell it correctly, import the Pygame module. We want to import sys, and then we're also, for later on, we're going to, from the random modules, we're going to import rand int, because we don't need to import the entire random module, we just want to import that one little section from it. Great. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our game variables and game settings, and we're going to go into our game variables and settings, and we're going to create a couple of variables. Over there, we're going to go with our screen width. It's going to be equal to 1 to 80. My greatness, 1 to 80. And our screen height is going to be 960. And then our tiles, each little tile size is going to be 40. So we're going to have a bunch of little 40 by 40 squares on the screen. So that's going to make up our board for the game. Alright, and what we want to do is we want to go ahead and we're going to run this game through a game object. So we're going to create a class. Oh, wow, my spelling is shocking tonight. Class for game. Right, and then obviously when we create a class, we need to do the init method. What is going on? Init method, self. We want to go with our screen width, we want to have our screen height, we want to have our cell size. Right, come on, what is going on? You see, the problem is I normally work on my laptop, so now I'm trying on the PC, and the keyboard's a bit bigger. Cool. So we've got our under init method here. So in our game class, we're going to create a couple of sections. So let's go with our game settings section. Under our game settings section, we're going to have our self.screen width. So we created our self.screen width variable, and in that we want to use the screen width. We're going to create the self.screen height, and that's going to be sh from the initialization. And then the next thing we need is we're going to go with our self.cell size. And that's going to come from the CS that we pass to this class. Right. The next section we're going to create a section called setup. And in that setup, we're going to initialize our Pygame module. And once you've initialized our Pygame module, we're going to create our game screen. So it's going to be self.game_screen is going to be equal to pygame.display set mode, and we set mode with self.screen width, self.screen height, so the capital. That's it for that. Then we're going to go with we want to change the caption, so it's pygame.display.set caption, and that's going to be set to collapse. Self.set caption, we're going to create our caption. The name of our game screen is going to be collapse. Right. The next thing we're going to go ahead and build is we're going to create our okay, we've got our game screen, we've got our Pygame display. The next thing we need is okay, we need to create the grid. In order to create the grid, okay, well, before we create the grid, let's go ahead and let's just create the other sections that we have. So we have our setup section, and we have the buttons setup section. The next section that we will have our game groups section. Right. Then have our game loop, and then lastly we will have information panel. Okay, once we've got all those, now we just want to create a couple of methods for this class. The first method we're going to create is we're going to do our run method. We're just going to pass it straightforward like that. We're going to say while run, while self.run. We don't actually have to say it self.run. Oh wait, we'll have self.run is equal to true. Okay. We want to self.update. We want to run self.draw. Okay, we don't self.run. Have we got self.run in our game loop? In our game loop, we want to create an attribute called self.run, and that's going to be set to true. So while self.run is equal to true, it should run the update function and run the draw method. The update method and the draw method. So we need to go ahead and we need to create the update method and the draw method. So down below the run method, we're going to go define update. And in my update method, we're going to call self.input, and I think that will be it for now. We'll just call the self.input method. The reason for that is when we run the game, we'll be able to actually quit the game. And the next thing we need to create is the draw method. Draw. Okay, we're going to go self.GameScreen .fill, and we want to fill it with so what we want to do is we want to create the game fill. We're going to fill the game screen. We're going to fill it with 0, 0, 0, which means the screen will be filled with a black color. Alright, and with the draw method after that, we still want to run the straightforward, the regular Pygame.display.update. Okay, before we let this run, we need to do a couple things, because obviously it's not going to run at the moment. Nothing's going to happen. We need to do an input method, and I've put my input method just above the update, so that's straightforward. Define input. Okay, so at my input method, we're basically going to be doing a check for we want to do this for event now in Pygame, Pygame.event.get, right? If event.type is equal to Pygame.quit, then we're going to say self.run must be equal to false. We're also going to, alright, we're just going to leave it like that for now. Okay, the last thing we need to still do is we actually need to make run the actual game, which we haven't done yet. So here underneath my main game section, we're going to go with the old tried and tested if name is equal to underscore main underscore main. Right, if name is equal to main, we then want to create the game, which will be equal to game. Using our variables we have right above us: screen width, screen height, and cell size. Screen width, screen height. That one was supposed to be a capital letter there. Let's make that capital letter. Screen width, screen height, cell size. Once we've got that, we actually want to call that game object and make it call the run method. And then obviously once it breaks out of the run method, we will then want to say Pygame.quit, and then sys.exit. Did I import the sys module? Sys.exit. Let's just make the program run and exit correctly. Oh, we did import sys. So if we run this now, we should shift F10. If we run this now, we should end up with a game object has no attributes is height. So there's our first error. That one should be at H. Okay, let's try again. Shift F10. And we have a blank screen, which is exactly what we expect to see. The game up there says collapse, and the screen is black, which is exactly what we were expecting to see. Great. I think what we need to go ahead with now is start creating the actual tiles. So we have our basic game setup. We use the setup for most of the time. So yes. Great. Now that we have the base game running and the game screen popping up, we're going to start going ahead and generating the images for those tiles. We need to make those squares that will appear across the screen, and in order to do that, we need to go down to our game utility functions. That's how I built it then. I was running a mixture between object-oriented programming and functional programming. Either or. I'm still getting my head around it, so this is how I did it this time. And the first thing we need to do is we're going to create a function, and that function is going to be called define CreateImage. Straightforward, nothing serious. Give it pass the two arguments. We're going to give it a num argument and a cell size argument. Cell size argument. Right. So inside this function, we have our dictionary of colors. Colors will be equal to dictionary. So 1 will be green, 2 will be red, 3 will be blue, 4 will be yellow, 5 will be purple. Alright, the reason why we're using a dictionary here is because we're going to be cycling through a large number of cells across the rows and columns of the entire game screen, and once we cycle through all those rows and columns, we're going to be randomly creating these images and randomly assigning an integer to each cell, and according to that integer that's assigned, that cell will then be given a color. Hence the dictionary colors dictionary. So alright, so that's what we have there. So we're going to go with cell. So each cell is then going to be equal to Pygame.surface, because we're creating a little image, and that surface is going to be size, cell size by cell size, because it's basically a square. And then we want to cell.fill. We're going to be filling that cell with the colors dictionary, and according to the number that we've passed as an argument in our argument over here. So basically when we create image, we'll be passing the cell size, which we already know is 40 by 40, but a number will be assigned to each image. Okay, and that number will then determine what color that cell is supposed to be. Once we've got that cell, we will then go pygame.draw.rect cell, a black line around that cell. That's what we're drawing here. So we're basically drawing a rectangle around our item surface. Cell size by cell size. So we're drawing a black border. Let me put it that way. Around our image or our tile. And then we just return the cell itself. Okay. So this would create a little square, be it green, red, blue, yellow, or purple, and it would return that image of that square to wherever it is that we are calling this CreateImage function. We're going to go back up to our game setup class, and in our game setup class, in my setup, underneath pygame.display.setCaption, we're going to create an attribute called self.sellimages, right? and that is going to be equal to, so we're going to do a little bit of a list comprehension, and with this list comprehension we're going to call our CreateImage function. We're going to pass it the num argument and self.cell_size argument, right? And this list comprehension is going to be for num in range 1 to 6. Okay. So what we've done there is we've created a little list of these 6 images, the 5 images, beg your pardon. So if you could imagine it, you would then have in this list of cell images each one of these colored squares. We would have a little square image of each one of these colors inside that little list over here. Right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our game group section. And in my game group section, I'm going to calculate the number of rows, and we're going to calculate the number of columns our game screen has. So to do that, we're going to go with self.screen_width, right, floored self.cell_size, and we're going to go with self.screen_height, floored by the self.cell_size. Okay. Therefore, we now have those two. So we know how many rows our screen can take, and we know how many columns our screen can take. We're then going to have our self.cells, which is basically our grid. And that takes a function which we're going to create now quickly. CreateCellgrid. We're going to scroll down. We're going to create that utility function. CreateCellgrid. Okay. CreateCellgrid here under my CreateGameImage. We're going to define CreateCellgrid, and in that cell grid we're going to go with X. We're going to give it a Y argument. We're going to give it a number of rows. Give it an X and Y. We don't need to give it an X and Y. My apologies. We're going to give it rows. We're going to give it cols, cell size, and we're going to pass to it main game. Right, because that's the game object that we want it to be passed to. It's going to change some of our attributes. Okay, so in this CreateCellgrid, we're going to have our grid, which is going to be a list. It's going to be a nested list at the end of the day. We don't need that. Right, this one's fairly straightforward. This CreateCellgrid, we're going to go for row in range rows, and then we're going to go for first we're going to say line is equal to, so that will be the row, then we'll say for col in range cols, right? So we're going to have value is going to be equal to randint. Remember that randint module that we the part of the random module that we imported right at the top. We're going to randomly choose between 1 and 5. So we want to choose a value, a number between 1 and 5, right? And once we've selected that number between 1 and 5, we then want to go to our line and append to our list, our line. We want to append a dictionary item. So that dictionary item is going to start off with value, and the value is going to equal to the value that we receive. Hang on, move there. So that value is going to be equal to the value that we've randomly been returned from that randint function. So we have value, then we're going to have image, and the image is going to be from the main game dot cell images, and we'll have it as value -1, just because of the way lists work, right? once we have that, do we want to include that now while we're busy with it? Okay, I'm going to include a few extra items now, although they will we'll only create those items later on in the videos. But I'd rather do it here so that's already included into our dictionary, and then we don't run into any issues later on. So we have the image, then we're going to have a large image, right? And that large image is going to be Pygame.transform.scale, and it's going to be our main game item dot cell images value -1, which is basically this item here, and included with that we're going to have 45 45, which will be the new cell size, because as you remember the cell size is 40 by 40. So we have the large image, cell size 45 by 45. The next thing we're going to put in there, like I said, we're going to include these items for now, even though we'll only build them later on. Actually, we won't be able to put that in now. I see that we will not be able to include two other items, but we can build those on later on. So that's not going to be an issue. What we're going to include now is the rectangle, and the rectangle will be Pygame.rect, and it will be the row multiplied by the cell size, and then 40. That's for later on. We will have the column multiplied by the cell size, and then cell size by cell size. Right, that's pretty straightforward. That's straightforward and easy enough. And then the last thing we're going to have, the last two things we're going to have focus, and that'll be set to false. And we'll have active, and that'll be set to true. Great, that's the end of our dictionary. Just put that back there so we don't lose our place. And that's the end of our little line.append, right? Then once we finish that line, we go one indentation back. So once we finish that for loop, we then want to grid.append line. And after that, we're going to return grid. Okay. So now we've created our CreateCellgrid. We've just made the CreateCellgrid. Let's just give it a comment here. Might be best. It generates a list of lists, which contains all of the cell information per cell. Let's do that. Okay. So now we're going to go back up to our main game class. And in our main game class, we've just created that self.cells. Where are we? We're over there, CreateCellgrid. So now we need to pass it those arguments. What were those arguments? Grid. Rows, columns, cell size, and main game. So rows, columns, cell size, and main game. Rows. Hang on a second. Hang on. Just give me one quick second. Okay, so what we were actually looking at, sorry, I just got myself stuck on something very quickly. Okay, let's try that. We need the rows, so the rows is going to be self.numRows, which is what we've just calculated above. Then we're going to have self.numCols, right? Cell size is going to be self.cellSize, of course. Self.cellSize, and then the last argument, remember we wanted to pass it the actual object, so that object is going to be self. Alright, So what we've done now is once we create this main object in our game class object, when the thing gets initialized, it will then generate that cell grid. Okay, we have the cell grid initialized. So now the only thing that we're left to do once we've created those cells, we've created those rows, the lists. The next thing we need to do is we actually need to draw it to the screen. So let's go down to our draw method again. Here below self.gamescreen.fill. Right, we're going to go for row in self.cells. No. Self.cells for line, no, for item in each row. For item in row. Alright, for item in row, we're then going to go with self.game screen.blit item self.image and then item rectangle. Right, so you'll remember that in the self.cells we created a list of lists, and included in that nested list is each item, and each item is actually a dictionary. So each item has its own dictionary values, and in that dictionary we then had the image included, as well as we had the rectangle, the Pygame rectangle. Remember the rectangle itself. Okay, I think if we run this, we should get the cells on the screen. Oh, we've hit a snag. Right, so we hit a snag. Game object has no attribute image. Really? Why? So where are we? Line 52. Self.gamescreen.blit item. Self.image. We don't have an image. We don't have an audio. Right. Okay, in my main game, my game class initialization, I forgot to add this attribute. There we go. In my game loop, under self.run, we're going to include a little thing called self.image, and that's going to be equal to image. Now this seems a bit silly to have this right at the moment, but a little bit later on in the video you'll understand why we have a attribute for this itself. Alright, let's give it a run and see what happens. And now we have an entire screen made up of colored cells. Ain't that just fantastic? Wait. I want to try this out. Check this out. I hope that worked, because I can't hear it. Alright. Great. Thank you so much for joining me on this video. We've done quite a bit actually. We've created our main game class, we've created our grid, we've created a way to generate our grid full of colored cells. We've made it so that those cells appear up on the screen. That's quite fantastic. So I'm just going to quickly run you through this, what we've done so far in this video, just in case there's anything that just might need a bit more clarification. So with what we want to do in this game itself, so let's go down, let's start at the top here. We've got our main game class, so that'll be the game running itself. There's our settings in my setup. So in my setup, I've got your self.cell images. So I've created a list of the 6 images. And the reason I did that, if I have it correct, is I don't want to load up each image, however many times per each cell. So instead, I just load up the images 6 times. Oh, excuse me. So I just loaded up the images once, put them into a list so that we can actually just reference them. Yeah, so instead of creating like however many cell images there are, each cell is just referencing its particular image in that list. So if we go down to our create images, our create cell grid there, here in my little dictionary of items, you can see there my image is basically just referencing straightforward that one image. So it's not like we've loaded in 400 times the same image. We've just loaded in the image once, and it's just being referred to each time it's pulled up onto the screen. As we're going along, you'll see later on we've got the large image. So what the large image is, which we'll do in the next video, I'd rather not do it in this one, but it'll be the first thing we do in the next video, is as you move the mouse over a cell, those squares will then slightly enlarge themselves. And once they're slightly enlarged, you'll know where, if your mouse is hovering over, and which cells your mouse is hovering over. The rest of this has been fairly straightforward, I believe, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Cheers for now.